Why have millions of Latin Americans left their homes and families to make an illegal, expensive, dangerous, and sometimes deadly journey north?
In a few moments, I will sign the North American Free Trade Act into law.
The government understood at the time they signed it that they were signing away life rights for a large part of its rural population. It wasn't a surprise for the government leaders, and it wasn't a surprise for the peasantry.
More people have died crossing the U.S.-Mexico border than died as a result of the September 11th terrorist attacks and Hurricane Katrina combined.
Cada día recordaba esa noche, cuando muchas personas no lograron cruzar.
And that's what this system of global apartheid is. It's morally corrupt.
This is the second cooler that we built to accommodate the overflow of border crosser deaths that we have. Generally, these people can be here for months and sometimes even years as we attempt to identify them.
A couple of years ago, a migrant died almost in the back door of the Baptist church in cells, and nobody said a word. You would think it was a stray dog that died.
Hi, I'm Kenny Anderson, Director of Multicultural Affairs for the City of Huntsville, and welcome to Impact. You just saw a trailer from a film called The Second Cooler, a film that focuses on the immigration issue right here in America. And today my guest is someone who is the producer of that film, the director, editor, and writer of that film, and so much more, and my subject matter expert on this topic in this area. She's Reverend Dr. Ellin Jimmerson. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
And congratulations on the film.
Thank you.
It's got to be exciting.
It's very exciting, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Listen, we saw this trailer, and the trailer, of course, is one of those kinds of experiences that causes people to ask more questions. And I think that's fantastic because I can now sit here and ask you the questions that I need to ask you having looked at this particular clip. The subject of immigration in this country is a very uncomfortable discussion for some people. At the same time, other people are, everywhere searching for answers, solutions. Our president has floated some ideas and some possibilities, and I do want to ask you what your thoughts are about policy as it relates to that a little bit later. But let's talk about the film first. And, when I used to think about filming, before I went to high school probably, I thought about films, big Hollywood things, and, you need a big budget and lots of people to make it happen. But you can make a film.
You can.
You've done that. Talk a little bit about the process and the purpose.
The process, well, there could never have been a more unlikely person to make a film. I mean, I never even took pictures of my kids, I don't have a camcorder. And so I had this idea but it was like I had to do it. I had to figure out a way to tell this story and to reach a broader audience. And so I just sort of had the idea, well, I'll get started and I'll stop when I can't go any further. And, little did I know that Martin Sheen would call the church office and say yes, he would love to do the narration, and just the doors kept opening. So I mean, I had to learn first of all to take the laptop out of the box and install software, learn Final Cut, and I just had so much good help along the way. But if you are determined, as I was, you can do it. I did have a little bit of an advantage in the fact that I do have a PhD in history, and I preach sermons, so I had some idea that you can take huge amounts of material and boil it down to a rather simple story, So I had some prior training, but not in filmmaking.
Right. Now, you mentioned one of my favorite actors of all time, Martin Sheen, and I think that the first time I became aware of the Second Cooler, I said, wait a minute, somebody locally did a film and Martin Sheen did the narration? How did that happen? So, I got to ask you that question.
I know.
You said he called the church and said he was willing to do narration, but I mean, how do you get a Martin Sheen to do your project?
It still doesn't make any sense, but the minister of music at my church, his name is Handy Avery, we were at Wednesday night supper one night. He said, how's the movie? And I said, it's doing good. It's about time for me to find an actor. And I was thinking of somebody local. I was thinking maybe Reg Cathy would do it, but he didn't return my phone call.
Shame on you, Reg. Maybe we'll give you another chance one day.
And so Handy, the minister of music, somehow got his email and sent him an email. And he said he wanted to get Martin Sheen, and I just laughed at him, and I said, well, go get him. I think it's a great idea. Well, 3 weeks later, he calls me up on the phone. He says, Ellin, are you sitting down? And turns out he had sent this email. Martin Sheen had been in India or somewhere, came home and was checking, and he said there were about 40 requests for help on projects, and nothing appealed to him or felt like it was right. He said by the time he got to the end of Handy's email, tears were streaming down his face.
Wow.
So I still don't know what Handy said in that email.
Wow.
But yeah, Martin Sheen called the church himself, Hello, may I speak to Handy Avery? May I say who's calling? It's Martin Sheen.
Now, Handy, if I get a call like that, and I've seen these things on TV before where it happened to the person and the person said, they hung up, or they said, no, that's not the person, or they scoffed at the idea. That has to be one of those moments where you're kind of like, okay, I know I reached out. I know I hoped that this would happen, but this really can't be happening.
No, you don't expect him to pick up the phone and call himself. He said, and so they talked about 30 minutes, and he said, I'll do it. He said, have Ellin come to Santa Monica in 3 weeks, and, I want a certain studio there. And I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't even written the narration.
Oh, wow.
Fortunately, it was pretty much in my head, but it's like, I need to get busy.
Wow.
So, and I said, well, I'm going to do it, I just had to do it.
Well, I asked you about process, and I didn't realize that, but gee, a 3-week window now, and you've got to actually transcribe this narration and get out to Santa Monica to not meet with people about meeting with Martin Sheen, but to actually connect with Martin Sheen and get it done.
To do it.
So how does that happen?
Well, as I say, I had been working on the material. I knew what the story was. So I actually wrote more lines for him to say than I used because I didn't yet know exactly what the story was, but I knew the pieces that he had to emphasize. I knew I wanted to get across that the Tohono O'odham Reservation in Arizona is ground zero for migrant deaths. So I just kind of started at the beginning and went to the end, and he was great to work with. The narration part of it, if I could read it at a leisurely pace, and it takes me about 20 minutes to get through. He gave me 4 hours and 15 minutes pro bono. I paid the studio costs, but he picked up his salary. He returned the union dues to me that I had to pay, so he was great.
What does that mean when you're starting out on a project that you said you are totally ill-equipped to do from the very beginning, and then to have a boost from a Martin Sheen who then provides the services pro bono? What does that feel like, and what does that say to you? What's the takeaway from that for you?
Well, it's just, it's a huge encouragement, and I knew that he could bring to the narration that nobody else that I had any access to could, and that his name would bring a certain interest, pique people's interest in the film. So it was just, a huge shot of confidence for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk about, where does this film come from in terms of purpose? What is your purpose in producing this film and this labor of love that you have now called The Second Cooler?
Well, the purpose is, you know, first of all, I feel so passionately that, you know, here we are. I grew up in the civil rights movement. My parents were civil rights activists. I grew up in Albany, Georgia, and Birmingham, Alabama, so I kind of cut my teeth on social justice activism, and it seemed that I was hearing people talk about other people in a way that I thought we had gotten past a little bit. So that's part of it, but I also knew in terms of policy and issues that people on the left and on the right, to simplify it, were not getting it right, in my opinion, and I just really, really want us to get it right.
Yeah. Well, you bring up an interesting issue, because oftentimes this discussion about immigration is framed in a bipartisan way. It's like, you know, left, right, Republican, Democrat. And I don't hear enough, I think I'm a lot like you, I don't hear enough about the human story in that whole process. That we're not talking about things, you know, we're not talking about objects, we're talking about people. And if there's a difficult challenge that has to be faced, then let's concede that, but let's not dehumanize people in the process, and let's not step over people in the process on our way to wherever we're going. How do you feel about that, or what are your thoughts about that in terms of just, you know, making this a one person's issue, another issue, as opposed to focusing on the humanity of the issue?
Yeah, focusing on the humanity and also focusing on the push factors. Why are there 11 or 12 million people in the United States illegally? Did 11 or 12 million people just up and have some sort of a break, you know, like a psychotic break, that I'm going to cross the border illegally and, you know, the rules be darned? And, you know, as a human being, as a historian, I knew that was not the case. And so, yes, I want to humanize it, but in order to humanize what's going on, we have to understand, for example, the part that the North American Free Trade Agreement played into this. We have to understand that America has two legal entry systems, and those legal entry systems are socially, ethnically, and racially encoded. So we can talk about the humanity of people, but if we don't understand the system, we can't change the system. All we can do is have a heart that breaks for other people, or a heart that's hardened to other people, but we don't really know how to make things better.
So you've done the film, and I wanted to make sure that people didn't just see the trailer, but that we actually had the chance to focus on a specific clip. And you have brought a clip here to add to our understanding of what you've done and this work that you produced, narrated by Martin Sheen. Why don't you set the clip up for us, and then let's have a look at it.
Yeah, this particular clip, to me, the situation out on the Tohono O'odham Reservation in Arizona and Mexico is almost like the entire issue sort of condensed into a microcosm. The reservation is ground zero for migrant deaths. It's ground zero for indigenous migrant deaths. So many, the migrants are disproportionately indigenous, and they're dying on another area where indigenous people live. And the tribal leadership in the nation wants to prohibit migrants from coming through, wants not to put water out on the reservation, wants not to put food out on the reservation. But one of the central characters in the movie is a member of the nation whose name is Mike Wilson, and he defies those injunctions by placing water out on the reservation. So you've got this intertribal dispute. And if you could step back as an Alabamian, as a white person or a black person, and kind of step back and just look at what's going on among indigenous people, you can just see that, you know, something is just so fundamentally wrong when you have all these indigenous people who have been funneled by the United States government through the nation's lands. They're dying, like 5,000 the remains of a minimum of 5,000 people have been recovered. But you've got these tensions coming from other indigenous people. It's just very, very interesting. So this is what the clip is about. And you know, Mike Wilson is a very, very interesting person. He is a member of the To'ono O'odham Nation, but he was also a member of Special Forces. Went to El Salvador, where his job was to capture the minds and the hearts of the people of El Salvador so we could do there what we wanted to do. And he had like a come to Jesus moment where he said to me, you know, he was there and all of a sudden he said, on what side of the table of justice do you sit? And so he left Special Forces, was called into Presbyterian Seminary, but then says he was called out of seminary by faith. So he's a very, very interesting man, but he's also a lay pastoral leader on the reservation, a Christian. And so one of the things he says in this clip is that when he sees the face of a migrant, he sees the face of the dispossessed, of the unclean. And it's his job as a pastor not to decide whether they're on the right side or the wrong side of the law, whether they're an illegal, but that they're a human being and he can minister to them.
Well, let's take a look at the clip, and then on the other side of the clip, we'll finish our conversation.
Very good.
When I was the lay pastor in cells, my session was asking me very critically, Pastor, shouldn't you be teaching and modeling us how to obey all federal, state, and local civil laws? And why are you aiding and abetting criminal activity and criminals? Because by legal definition, they are all illegal. And my response to them was, as your pastor, if I must decide between a legalistic code and a universal moral code, which one must I obey? God's children are dying. Your brothers and sisters in Christ are dying. Men, women, children, infants, and pregnant women are dying in the desert. Which law must I follow? They don't want to acknowledge a moral question. They don't want to acknowledge a biblical mandate. That I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me water. Because if they acknowledge the moral question, they must acknowledge a moral responsibility. And they don't want to do that. It's easier to let them die.
Wow, that was pretty powerful. I think this is a film that I know you hope lots of people will see, and I'm sure that you hope from seeing this that it will generate a lot of dialogue. I know you've been screening the film. You've been traveling around the nation actually screening this film, and you've got some additional work to be done now because you're about to begin some distribution work as far as this film is concerned.
That's right.
Is part of the goal here to generate dialogue, and what do you hope might come from some of those discussions? And then talk a little bit about the distribution process that you're about to go into right now.
Yeah, absolutely. What I want to do is generate dialogue. You know, there are some things we just need to know about. We need to really understand that the U.S.-Mexico border is militarized. I mean, I don't think people really understand that there are, as the trailer showed, helicopters hovering there, 22,000 agents on the border, stadium lights, infrared cameras, all of these things that you associate with a war zone is right there on our southern border. And the reason the border was militarized was to keep people displaced by NAFTA from crossing. I mean, we knew at the time we signed this free trade agreement what would happen to people. That's why we militarized the border. We need to be talking about these things. we need to be aware of it. We also need to be aware of what some of the major proposals have been, one of which is a major extension of the guest worker program, which sounds so benevolent, a guest, you know? I mean, it sounds so much nicer than calling someone an illegal, for example. But in fact, guest workers are people who come in a state of indentured servitude. They are very, very vulnerable. The Southern Poverty Law Center's Mary Bauer, who wrote a report on it, called it a condition that is perilously close to human trafficking and to slavery. We have to be aware of what it is we're actually talking about when we talk about comprehensive immigration reform. And so for me, that is sort of like the stake right there. Do we understand what these proposals are? I think most people, when you hear comprehensive immigration reform, it sounds like efforts to do right by migrants. But if you look at the title, for example, of the bill that passed in the Senate in 2013, it's the Border Security, Economic Opportunity, and Immigration Modernization Act. Primarily what this is a border to further militarize a bill to further militarize the border, which will inevitably mean more migrant deaths. It's a bill to extend the guest worker program. That's the economic opportunity part of it. And then the immigration modernization part of it basically is an effort to shift immigrants into the deportation system. It promises a pathway to citizenship, but in order to even get into that pathway, you have got to turn yourself in to the very institution that's oriented to deporting you. And so I don't see, you know, people will argue with me, well, it's a step in the right direction. And, you know, for me, for the life of me, I can't see how more militarization is better than the high level we already have. How more people in a state of servitude is better than the 125 or so that we have now.
And yet people will argue that, as you would certainly concede, I know, which is again why I think it's so important to have a film like this and to create the kind of dialogue, to present objective ideas and to gain a full understanding and appreciation for what really is going on in these situations as a consequence of these actions. We've got just a few minutes left. I want to make sure that we get the distribution information out there for people, because that's got to be exciting. It's just another phase of the work. What's happening with that?
Well, I have decided to go with a non-traditional distribution route. I think the best way to get the movie out there quickly and to as many people as possible is to do what's called a direct-to-fan distribution plan. And that means that when I get set up, and it should be in another 6 weeks or so, if you go to the website, The Second Cooler, or even come to my Facebook page, you can right then press a button and either rent the movie, download it to rent, or buy a copy of the DVD.
And this, of course, it's got to be exciting because we've got technology today that actually provides for that type of thing to happen when, say, 20 years or so ago, you would have been looking for some big distribution company to come along to pick up indie film, and it's like maybe they will, maybe they won't.
Yeah, so, exactly. Maybe they will and maybe they won't push it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the only thing people need to know is the name of the movie, The Second Cooler, and they'll be able to go right there and right then without having to find it somewhere else.
I'm going to say, and you may think this, but you would probably not just go around saying this. I'm going to say you've had a lot of success with this process. I know it has not been easy, but it certainly has produced a tremendous amount of satisfaction, I am sure.
Absolutely.
Do you have another movie in you?
Yes, I do.
Wow.
Yeah, in fact, I have a couple of ideas that have been, one that has been floated to me and one that I have sort of cooked up in my head. I'm not really ready to say what they are, but I absolutely have another film in me. Wow. It would be a shame to go this far and learn this much and then, be like Harper Lee and only write the one book.
There you go. We can't have that at all. all.
So, yeah.
Reverend Dr. Ellin Jimmerson, the writer, director, producer, and the editor, and now the distributor of the film, The Second Cooler. Thank you for coming on today and
You're
giving us such
welcome.
great input. Where can people, let's get them the website so people can go to the website and check out what you have.
Oh, absolutely. They should go to the website right now and watch the trailer again and look around for things I've written and so forth. It's just thesecondcooler.com. If you're on Facebook, the Second Cooler fan page is a good place to stay updated, or Ellin Jimmerson on Facebook.
All right, you covered all the bases, and thank you for being here with us today. Come back and see us.
I'd love
Tell us how
to.
things are going, and
I'd love
especially when you
to.
get the next film going as well. All right?
All right.
Thank you very much. We want to thank you for being a part of our broadcast today, and we hope that you learned a lot, and we'll also check out thesecondcooler.com and get that great information about the film that we've talked about today. In the meantime, we hope that you have a great rest of the week, and as always, remember that knowledge is better than riches. Have a great afternoon. We'll talk soon.